In October 1347, Genoese ships docked in Sicily, carrying a hidden cargo that plunged Europe into an apocalyptic crisis. Florence alone lost up to 60% of its population to the Black Death. The streets became mass graves, and the medical establishment of the time offered no solutions to the swelling buboes and rapid mortality. Prior to this arrival, medieval society operated on a rigid theological premise. The Church instructed Christians to quietly endure their earthly suffering, promising that unquestioning obedience and piety would be rewarded in the afterlife. But as the death toll mounted across the continent, prayers went unanswered, and religious institutions failed to halt the contagion. The established order provided no physical or spiritual protection. This trauma forced a reassessment. Survivors began to question the institutions that had failed to relieve their suffering, creating an intellectual opening for a society no longer satisfied with medieval explanations for their reality. That search found fertile ground in northern Italy. Unlike the vast rural agricultural expanses of Western Europe, cities like Florence were densely packed, highly developed urban centers. These citizens were also surrounded by the physical remnants of the Roman Empire. Towering columns and ruined monuments served as daily reminders of an advanced, powerful civilization that existed long before the current despair. The plague's massive labor shortages also disrupted the rigid social hierarchy. Merchants stepped into the power vacuum, building vast fortunes through overseas trade. They relied on their own financial wits and merit to advance, rather than inherited noble titles. Surrounded by the ruins of a golden age, armed with new disposable income, and scarred by recent trauma, these Italian merchants chose to invest their resources in celebrating human capability in the present tense. Cosimo de' Medici, head of Europe's wealthiest banking family, recognized the political utility of this new mindset. He deployed his vast fortune to commission public art and architecture, using beauty and intellect to secure dictatorial control over Florence. But the merchant class faced an intellectual barrier. They wanted to revive the learning of classical antiquity, yet Western scholars had lost access to the most crucial Greek and Roman scientific manuscripts centuries earlier. The recovery of those texts came from outside Europe. Islamic centers of learning had meticulously preserved and expanded upon Aristotelian philosophy, Euclidean geometry, and optical sciences. As we see mapped along these trade routes, that knowledge flowed steadily across the Mediterranean into Venice and Florence. Italian intellectuals absorbed these Islamic scientific texts and applied them directly to visual art. They adapted advanced optical mathematics to develop linear perspective, successfully mapping three-dimensional space onto a flat surface. The visual majesty we associate with Italian art was the direct product of imported mathematical science, funded by ruthless merchant banking. Then, in 1453, the Ottoman Turks conquered Constantinople, extinguishing the last remaining stronghold of the Byzantine Empire. Fleeing the destruction, Byzantine scholars sought refuge in Florence. They brought with them original, complete manuscripts of ancient philosophers, including Plato and Aristotle, rescuing them from the fires of the siege. These original Greek documents bypassed the Church's traditional theological filters. Italian humanists could finally read the ancients on their own terms, studying their unedited thoughts on ethics and natural philosophy. A Florentine chancellor named Leonardo Bruni recognized the gravity of this influx. He organized history into three distinct periods: antiquity, a period of decline he called the Middle Ages, and the modern era he was currently living in. By categorizing the previous centuries as an era of darkness and decay, Bruni defined his own time as a distinct rebirth of classical learning. He invented the concept of the Renaissance. Florence became a testing ground for these recovered ideas. Artists began producing works that blended ancient Greek mythology with Christian subjects, executing them with newly acquired mathematical precision. They discarded the flat, rigid styles of the Middle Ages. Sculptors studied anatomy to present the naked human form in its ideal state, creating monuments to individual merit and physical perfection. Masters like Leonardo da Vinci applied the imported geometric principles to their most high-profile religious commissions, structuring their compositions around strict mathematical symmetry to create a sense of divine order. As wealth concentrated in Rome, the Vatican itself adopted this aesthetic. Popes spent fortunes commissioning artists to decorate their halls, resulting in Catholic spaces dominated by massive tributes to pagan Greek philosophers. These commissions moved the values of the elite from private libraries into the public square. By making human achievement and classical histories so physically present, these works began to change how Europeans saw themselves and their world. The philosophy driving this shift became known as humanism, an intellectual movement prioritizing human potential, rational observation, and the study of history and literature over medieval metaphysical debates. The focus of society had pivoted. Instead of enduring hardship in preparation for the afterlife, the educated class prioritized secular education, personal achievement, and actively shaping their earthly environment. The modern mind was forged in a crucible. It required the collapse of medieval certainty, the aggressive ambition of self-made merchants, and the strategic rescue of ancient knowledge to break the old cycle. The 14th century began with mass graves, failing institutions, and a population helpless against an invisible disease. Yet from that devastating collapse emerged a society that learned to engineer soaring mathematical triumphs against the sky. The Italian Renaissance serves as enduring evidence that humanity's greatest intellectual and cultural leaps are often forced into existence by its darkest traumas.